The program you're about to watch is underwritten by Allergan. The views expressed therein are solely those of the doctors. Wrinkles. It's almost a four-letter word in a culture that's constantly trying to look and feel like its youngest, most beautiful best. But wrinkles aren't always an enemy to be blasted or sanded away upon the discovery of some light crow's feet. I've got a take on wrinkles that will have my industry colleagues shaking in their boots. I'm Dr. Doris Day. I'm a board-certified dermatologist. I'm also a medical journalist and radio talk show host. Today's main discussion is called It's a Fine Line, in which we dissect the truth about what it really means to age gracefully. We'll also debunk common skin myths, answer a question from one of our glow-getters, and you'll even get a look into my personal handbag to see an item that I absolutely cannot live without. It's all coming up on The Gist.
Meet 5 of the most sought-after dermatologists in the country.
The most important part of the show is we have the truth, we own the truth.
It's our behind the scenes. There's no filter. It's like all the conversations we have in the breaks.
It's going to be so fun to
Yes.
kind of share some of our favorite things like shoes or travel tips, relationships.
Travel tips are great.
Do you guys remember that commercial from, I think it was the 80s?
Well, I was just born in the 80s.
It's all coming up on The Gist.
To the dermatologist.
Today's topic we're calling It's a Fine Line because it's all about wrinkles. And the idea of people racing to erase everything on their face really doesn't make you look younger. But we all have that moment when we look in the mirror and we say, uh-oh, and we notice that first line and we feel our mortality. We say, I look like my mother. And it's not that you don't love your mother, but you don't necessarily want to age like her in some cases. So it's really about looking as youthful as you can and most attractive and aging beautifully. So getting rid of all the fine lines doesn't really always make someone look better, and I think those lines tell a story. So Ruth, how do you feel about when people come in and they complain, let's say, of their forehead lines? And you know that it's not the right thing to do to just erase them.
Probably the most common complaint that I get. But the issue, and I have to point it out right from the start, is that the forehead muscle, the frontalis muscle, is what elevates your brow. And so as soon as you point that out to the patient, whether she's 30, 50, or 80, and she wants to have her brow lifted, she said, oh, don't touch that, because the brow lift, the elevation of the brow is so important.
That's great, but I find that patients, it's hard to get that message across because what happens is they want the lines gone and their brows up, and they don't really get that connection that that's the muscle lifting it. So I try to tell them, but they say, no, inject here to make that go up. So what do you tell them?
So I literally go onto their face and I'm like, okay, if you want that line gone, then I'm going to have to do this. And I push their brow down. And I'm like, so you tell me if this is what you like. And so it's going to change your brow position. But
Right.
Is there any other way? No, that's the only way, because that's the muscle responsible for giving you the shape of your brow. So just because you can get rid of a wrinkle doesn't mean you should, because it's participating in perhaps another function of your overall facial aesthetic. And so sometimes by doing that and giving them the mirror, then they get it.
Well, now we have so many more tools to improve lines and wrinkles and sort of redirect. So you treat so many people who have to look authentic because, you know, in LA you have all these actors, and on the one hand they're going on screen and they need to have expression, but they also don't like their lines or wrinkles either.
Yes, it's literally a fine line to walk because the actors get a mixed message. They get one message from the director of a project and another message from their agent. It's a very careful balance.
It's true, and I think that the crow's feet, the lines on the side, are like sparkles in so many people, as long as they're not etched in and coming all the way down the sides.
And the field is changing so rapidly, and so there are all new things that are coming to market and that we get to experience before the public, obviously. And so it's really important to educate your patients about what's in the pipeline, what's coming, what they will be able to do without danger, and it's really an education.
I always tell them two things. I tell them that 90% of skin changes, 90% of wrinkles are from sun exposure. 90%. So if you want to have fewer wrinkles, wear sunscreen every day all year round. We've talked about that so much. The second is that emotion is tied to expression as much as expression is tied to emotion. So that repetitive motion of a smile actually means that you are happier, and it's not a bad thing. But that frown makes you unhappy and projects unhappiness. So part of using a neuromodulator to help, or a wrinkle reducer to help eliminate lines, I kind of combine that with facial expression exercises. Do you do that at all? Where I have them pull their ears back, or at least try, because you can only go in one direction at a time. So if they pull back or are thinking about it, they feel happier and they're not frowning.
Well, by that token, some wrinkles are positives, maybe
Yes.
like having like little happy crow's
Right.
feet, but the negative, that deep frown,
It's gotta go.
It's got to
Or like the
go
corners of
because
the
you
mouth going down.
Yeah, because of the negative facial, the feedback loop that we have from the expression on our face, and all of the nonverbal communication that goes on. So if we're frowning, I think that's the basis of resting bitch face, right? If we're frowning, no one knows if we're angry, if we're upset, or what's going on. So
when they're
think
completely
that's
frozen, we don't know
yeah,
if
and
they're
we
feeling
could
anything.
We
But
could just
that's
be squinting.
Yeah.
We could just be squinting. And I tell my patients constantly, this makes you look stressed.
So I would love to hear, you've been doing this for years, and you've been doing it for years too, but there's a little bit of a time lag there about what your experience has been over many years and seeing your patients that you've been injecting over time. Now that we've been able to finesse it, where we're not freezing everything, we're resculpting.
Well, and the truth of the matter is, patients come in often and they'll say, after they're over the hump of being afraid to have it, but then after they're experienced and they've had it, they'll often say, I like it better with more movement. I feel more like myself. So there's a trajectory of how you feel after a treatment, and it's really important for the physician to tune into that.
Right.
There's this disconnect of I want to be natural, but I can still move.
So what I've
It's odd.
you can't have both.
They want both.
I wish. And so what I try to tell my patients is sometimes you've been looking like this, you got, it took about 30 or 35 years or 40 years to get to where you are today. It's unrealistic to believe that one treatment is going to make you look radically different or is going to efface every single line in 2 weeks. So to maybe look natural, but also understand that over time with these treatments, those lines will soften. With that understanding, sometimes patients are like, okay, so maybe it's not just about this one treatment, it's about a journey, and
Absolutely.
over time they will soften.
I have to say, I tell my patients it is better to have used some wrinkle reducer and stopped than to have never wrinkle reduced at all. It is much like love.
Right.
I love feel it once.
But there is a way to help people understand the balance of what we can do for them without having them cross the line into overdoing things. But we have to constantly monitor, which is why I always say it's so important to see an aesthetic physician who knows how to assess, who knows how to guide you, and knows how to help you celebrate lines and wrinkles as something you've earned and that can make you look better, and also where we need to soften them because they can also be negative. So not all wrinkles are bad is our bottom line, is what I would say. So next up, I'll show you what's in my bag. So what's in my bag that I can't live without? It may surprise you, it's mascara. And the reason why is that if you could do one thing to look more beautiful and even more youthful, it's having longer, thicker, darker lashes. And for whatever reason, if you're out and about and you have to wash your makeup off, or if you're out swimming or at the beach, reapplying mascara will help you look more beautiful in a pinch. I like the two-sided one. One side makes your lashes longer, and the other side, with its special brush, can make your lashes thicker. So thicker, longer, darker, makes your tired eyes look less tired, can even hide a little bit of a sagging upper eyelid, and just naturally adds to your beauty like nothing else. That's what's in my bag. The myth I'd like to dispel is that wrinkles make you look older. Lines and wrinkles tell beautiful stories, and they're to be studied, not erased. It's about balance. Crow's feet around your eyes are like sparkles, and some patients come in and comment on them in the mirror and say it's like lines and wrinkles are all they see and they want them erased. But in reality, if we address the brow, for example, by lifting it rather than removing the wrinkle, you get a result that's more natural, more awake, and younger, but not done. I'm looking at this group and we all look like mature women. I mean, we look fabulous, but we're not 25, except maybe you, but we're not 25. And actually, I like looking older. I don't think it's a bad thing. And we know there's structural changes that happen as we age, so we're going to look different as we age. But I think that older is better, and we can get more beautiful because we learn to express based on our life experiences, and that's something that we can't buy or inject. So what do you think about age?
So I think sometimes
Easy for you to say, but
Gotten there.
I am. But I think sometimes our patients look to us to give them that confidence. I think they want to hear from us that it's okay that they have some wrinkles, because I think that they're getting so many mixed messages. Every single cover on a magazine is completely redone and touched up, and so no one has any wrinkles anymore, or at least what they perceive. People have all these filters on Instagram, and so what the feedback that they're getting in every single image that they're exposed to is one that's flawless, and so that's not reality. And so they come to us and they need somebody to give them that feedback that that's not true and that you're absolutely okay.
Right, I think that's true. And Ruth, I know you've been seeing patients for how many years now?
32 years.
32
long time,
years, and
long
I'm
time.
sure you have a lot of patients for those 32 years, and they must come in and say, I've known you for so many years, and you still look as beautiful or more
Well,
beautiful.
it's true. And the bottom line is even the 70-year-old women who are still coming in to be seen and injected, it's because they're a part of life. They're alive. They're not giving up. And I think that's the part that needs to be embraced, because what we're doing is we're basically putting them in touch with the fact that they still feel vibrant. And
Yes.
that's what we're trying to enhance.
Yep. And do you ever find that in Southern California that patients come in with lines and wrinkles really early on and they're mortified by it, and all of a sudden they feel ancient and just want them erased, but aren't willing to take the other measures to not have the lines and wrinkles? They still want to go out in the sun, they still want to tan because they work out so hard, they love their bodies, and they want to be on the beach.
Well, that's where the patient education comes in, because you can get lines and wrinkles on your face, your neck, your chest from cumulative sun exposure. And so preventing the sun exposure, taking measures to reduce it is all important. But I really like to focus with my patients on facial contour. So because I know that as patients get older, they start to pancake out. And so maintaining that, you know, as I said, the curve of the face along with the curve of the body is so important. So we do a lot of that. And then I do a lot of, I call it paintbrushing, like just sort of gently, like not treating to
airbrushing. I love that.
Yeah, just not treating to full correction, but just softening everything.
And Janine, in patients with skin of color, is the aging process really different? Do they age better? Do they wrinkle less? How do you find that balance, and how do you address it?
Well, what I like to tell my patients is before the age of 60, African Americans age with patchy hyperpigmentation, Caucasian patients age with fine lines and wrinkles, and then Latino and Asian patients age somewhere in between. And then after about the age of 60 to 65, every ethnicity catches up with every ethnicity.
Yeah.
And then people are like, what happened? What's happening? Come help me now. And I explain to my patients that not all wrinkles are bad wrinkles, and that we need to address what's making them feel negatively about themselves, or what I could do to help them in their goals towards looking better. And then we go from there, because with my patients it's about economic viability in terms of not wanting to be the old guy or gal at the job, and it's also about romantic viability, right? Ladies, we want to look good
100%.
for, you know, our significant other, whomever that might be.
Or a potential significant other.
Yeah. So Sabrina, what kind of a story do you go with in telling in how you address a wrinkle in different parts of the face? And are there any good ones?
I know. I'm still thinking if there are any good ones. Maybe the ones around the eyes are good, right? Because I think they show joy and someone that's maybe a little bit more approachable and happy. But I think that these lines, the ones in the cheeks, are always so difficult for patients, and they just want to fill them. And so I tell them that if you get rid of all of these lines, you're just going to look heavier in your lower face. And the reason that this is happening is because you don't have the bone along the mandible, the jawline, and sometimes even the cheek to support all the soft tissues.
I think that's one of the most important things, is that as we've learned to inject, we've learned that we don't chase a line or wrinkle. We have to address the underlying source. For the forehead lines, it's actually lifting the brows rather than just erasing the lines. For these lines, sometimes it's in the mid-face by lifting up. Even under the eyes, we talked about tightening the skin and using products. So do you have like a set pattern that you go to with patients in terms of how you approach it? Do you go superficial superficial to deep or deep to superficial. How do you approach your patients or the way you think about wrinkles?
Well, I think every patient deserves the optimal skincare, and so we always start there. But then I think it's very important to look at have the patient look at her face or his face, you look with them, and you go step by step in everything that is great and really holding up and everything that could use some help. And then we give them all the options. You can have injectables, you can have laser treatments, you can have all different kinds of treatments that work together, but it's always...
And then you prioritize based on downtime
financial
and cost.
concerns and downtime in their lifestyle.
So we all agree it's not just about looking younger, it's about looking like the best version of you. Up next is a question from this episode's Glow Getter. Now we'll hear from one of our Glow Getters about lasers and anti-aging.
Hi, my name's Natalie, and I live in Brooklyn, and my skin issues are multiple and varied. I've had melanoma a couple of times, and I have had psoriasis for over 30 years, and I am treated for that with a biologic. And methotrexate, actually. And so definitely skin issues from a medical side are on my mind, always. But like any woman, I'm interested in anti-aging. I'm 48 now. And one of the things I find really confusing in this landscape is the unending supply of advice about things like lasers, etc., when you have very delicate skin and you have to be careful about how you treat it. So a couple of times I've paid for a consultation with a dermatologist and then been still confused about what I should do with the information that they've given me.
Thank you, Natalie. Natalie is a really interesting patient because she has a few different skin issues that we need to take into account, with psoriasis, being on biologics and immunosuppressants, and also having history of melanoma, and then being 48 and perimenopausal at some point, even if she's not at menopause. So we'll start with you, Ruth. How would you approach her? And she's also been inundated and overwhelmed with information. She already has a skincare, a health routine, and now we're going to add in other routines for anti-aging. And she also looks great.
The obvious issues for her are the most important ones. She's had a history of melanoma, so that comes first and foremost, and you have to basically teach her how to protect her skin. Is she taking...
And her eyes.
Is she taking oral agents that reduce her absorption of UV? Is she wearing her protection as often as she should and reapplying it? And then you move on to the other medical concerns, which obviously are her psoriasis. And so she's probably in a condition and knows that she feels a little bit better and her psoriasis is slightly improved with gentle sunlight, but she has double whammy, and she has to be really careful about the balance of exposure and protection. But there's always something that can be done to make her look better and feel better. And for someone who's had these two major concerns, it's really important to make her look better and feel better.
Right. Ava, what would you offer her? What advice would you give her?
Well, certainly I would educate her about checking her skin every month, head to toe, looking for any new moles, anything changing, and also really explore different ways to treat her psoriasis, and then talk to her about, what's really near and dear to her heart, which is her anti-aging protocol.
So what would you do for her for anti-aging? What would you recommend?
Well, I would recommend I'd start with a series of lasers for her and at-home skincare.
So you would work on resurfacing?
Yeah, and also it looks like she has a little bit of rosacea, sort of treat the
so
redness.
Intense pulse light maybe.
Maybe some IPL.
Skincare.
Yeah, exactly. And there's an at-home mask too that it's an LED mask. There's like 30 of them that come, and you can use it at night, and it's really soothing to the skin.
So it's nice to have home care advice as well for our patients, but what would you offer her, Janine? How would you build on what Ava said, and what would you do differently?
I would definitely treat her rosacea because she has underlying redness, and I would alternate between treatments with one of the kind of pulse dye type lasers, and then alternate that with non-ablative fractional resurfacing, so you could go back and forth a little bit. She really needs to put on the sunblock, reapply it more frequently,
and just be sun smart,
and get to the dermatologist every 3 months for a full body screen. If she's had more than one melanoma, that is her absolute and utter priority.
Would you do anything to add to that?
I would, if she's had multiple melanomas, I would have her get genetic testing, because there are mutations that people that get many melanomas have that also can create other forms of internal cancers. And so I would have her see a geneticist, and then I would also counsel her on where have these melanomas been, because I like to do, maybe not specifically for melanoma, but for many of my patients that have recurrent skin cancers, especially on the face, I like to do field therapy with photodynamic therapy, where we apply a medicine that is cleared for the treatment of precancerous spots. And then when you apply it, it also gets absorbed by red blood cells, it also gets absorbed by pigment, and any cell that's actively growing rapidly, which could be precancerous. And so by activating that chemical with an IPL, it will also address her redness, or a pulsed dye laser, and then sitting her under a blue and red light. So she'll have the anti-aging benefit of the treatment, because it's also been found to stimulate collagen and also treat any precancerous lesions.
See, I think for someone like Natalie, diet is absolutely critical, and I do believe that diet has a lot to do with psoriasis. And there was a great article I read about is psoriasis a bowel disease, a gut disease, and it has to do with leaky gut. So there are some supplements that I recommend that are really inexpensive at the drugstore, and some rules around how to do that. But I do think that for more often than not, adding, and then also with melanoma and getting added sun protection, diet is so important for her. So a good antioxidant diet, certain supplements that can help with that leaky gut potentially, and just maybe being evaluated that way. But in terms of anti-aging, I kind of like for her something that's going to do skin tightening, because she's 48, she's at perimenopause. I would love a radiofrequency device maybe once a year or so that's going to help, or an ultrasound to help with lifting the brows and tightening, and then the rest for me is going to be home care. She looks pretty balanced and symmetric and even, so overall she looks good. So that's why I was thinking of just the tightening. It'll help her age beautifully over time.
And the diet thing is critical. I read that same article, and so more so than even just the diet, I encourage them strongly to lose weight, because psoriasis is linked to being overweight significantly.
Right.
And a lot of people have more melanomas if they do have a little bit more weight on them. So I would encourage her to lose weight. I do believe in turmeric also. I think that article suggested the anti-inflammatory benefits of turmeric, so I recommend it from the higher level stores like Whole Foods or GNC, rather than just plucking some off the internet. And then obviously, absolutely,
be careful
vitamin
with
D.
the amounts you're taking of supplements, because people get into a lot of trouble when they're not doing it in an organized fashion.
Yeah, it's
Or
much
how it interacts with other drugs that they
it's
may
not
be
just
on.
an easy go to Whole Foods.
Exactly. No, it's much better to eat a diet that is filled with different colored, deeply colored fruits and vegetables. And that actually has been shown to help reduce the incidence of leaky gut, because it turns out that your microbiome in your gut needs those so-called prebiotics to digest, and then it creates like a slime barrier in the inside of the gut, so that any food particles don't enter into the bloodstream.
Make your plate as colorful as
inflammation that will lead to
and
the
what's
psoriasis.
in season. Ideally eating fruits and vegetables that are in season.
And help with her rosacea.
Right. She needs to have her skin checked. She wants to check her diet, make sure she has more vegetables in all different colors of the rainbow, ideally fruits and vegetables in season. Sun protection is critical. See a dermatologist and an eye doctor, because melanoma can occur in the eyes. And just enjoy aging beautifully. I think she gets it more than most people. That was this episode of The Gist. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, fillers can definitely help you look your best, but your best is the most healthy, radiant, and natural version of you. You get the gist.
What demographic doesn't have to wear sunscreen? Find out on The Gist.